Yeah, right, guys and girls, it's Phil here. I thought I'd start this video a little differently. As a rookie blacksmith, one of the things I've most wanted to make is my own hammer. It's kind of a thing I think you've got to do, isn't it, really? You know, you're getting into this trade, you need your own hammer. And obviously, me being a big fan of Alex Steel, as I'm sure anybody who knows me is aware, I like the sort of Alex Steel-esque hammer. You know, the one with the two cheeks, the rounding and the flathead. So that's kind of been the goal for me. However, and I wonder if other people have had the same thing, but I've run into something which I'm going to refer to as the blacksmith's paradox, which is, in order to make a tool, you need a tool that's already made. What I mean by this is, in order to create a hammer, you need a hammer-eye punch. And in order to have a hammer-eye punch, you need a punch to punch the punch. So I've been trying to rack my head around how I'm going to create something without the right tool. This video is kind of the solution I've come up with. So I'm not using a punch, I'm creating a punch in order to, at some point, make a hammer. This is very confusing. I'm using a lot of weird words in a lot of weird orders, so I will fully understand if you're not really following at this point. But just go with me, watch the video, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. The tools I'm going to be using is just the normal mallet, which I just purchased in a shop, a cheap little chisel, and I'm going to create a drift out of some EN24 steel, which you might have seen me make in the other video. Pretty simple to do this. All you do, you take an inch round stock of this EN24 steel, you put a distal taper on it, a nice long smooth taper, and then you hammer it flat. And the idea is you punch your hole, you drift it, and that will mean you can then fit the handle. So without any further ado, here we go. So there's the hammer and the chisel. This is just a cheap little shop bought chisel. The mallet is also shop bought, although I did, as you can see, grind off the side to turn it into a crossbeam hammer, but any hammer would do. And then this is the drift I've already made. You can't see what I mean, so just a long distal taper, and then it's hammered flat, so you get this kind of hammer-eye shape going down it. One thing I found is that when you see other people on YouTube talking about how to make these tools, obviously most of them are professional blacksmiths and they all already have the tools. So I figured I'd do this as a bit of a how-to guide for someone who doesn't have a power hammer or doesn't have a striker, and you know, they're just doing it on their own. So hopefully this is useful for some of you out there. So I've stuck in a piece of EN24 steel, and I've just welded on this bit of angle iron. And the idea is when I take it out of the forge and place it on the anvil iron will help keep it level. Because obviously where I don't have a striker, I'm having to both hold the rod between my legs, which can obviously mean it will roll around and be unstable, and obviously then hammer, and I'm having to use this chisel as my punch. So I'm going to try and get through with the chisel first, come from both directions, see if it can form a plug, and then I'll be going on to my drift, which I've got stored down there. So just wait and see really how this comes out. So just from using the chisel, I've got to here. I think I will be able to push that through, but I don't know whether or not it's going to form a plug. So I might just have to just literally use brute force and whack it straight through, but don't know, I'll give it a try and see what happens. I've got no idea. Well, I'll be damned, it formed a plug. Look at that. Now all I've got to do is get that out and then I can start drifting. I'm actually slightly surprised and amazed that that worked, but happy days. I feel like once I get this piece done, this is like the first tool, sort of it's the start of the avalanche. From here I can start making others. And that actually looks pretty central. I'm pretty happy with that for a first go, and with the wrong tool. Just a cheap little half cut off chisel. Beautiful. I mean, look at that. All that fuss for that tiny little sliver. It's barely even a mil thick. Ridiculous. So the new drift works like a dream. This is where we're up to. We've got the, hang on a minute, I'll see if I can release it. There we go. We've got the eye, and it looks pretty straight, and it looks pretty central, surprisingly, on all counts. Next step will be to draw out the cheeks sideways so that there's more surface area with the handle when it's put in. But this is going surprisingly well. I'm just waiting for it all to go wrong, because it's inevitable. Here's where we are up to now. I've now cut off the end. Hot cut Hardy would have been better, but I've got to make one first, so angle grinder it was. But you can see the hammerite has actually worked pretty well. There's a little bit of tidying up needed just on this inside here, but I'll get that with the die grinder. So now the job is to add the taper into this and make it a nice pointy thing. So back in the forge with it. Well, I'll be damned. We've formed a punch. The only last thing to do is to slightly tidy up this taper. I didn't want to risk doing it forged, just because I don't think I'm good enough yet. And then I just need to grind on the point, and obviously find a handle. I don't actually have any wood at the moment, so I'm not quite sure when I'm going to do that. But there we are. And there's the finished punch head. Nice, sharp, pointy. I've ground it back, as you can see. I'm not too worried about getting all these details out, because as soon as it gets hot it's going to turn dark grey again. What I have done is I've gone around the inside with the die grinder, and I've sort of put this slight taper on this side, because that's the side the wood's going to be going through, the underside. So yeah, that's all done. Last thing to do now is just to get a handle. There we are, we've now grinded ourselves a nice handle, which is made of hickory, so it'll be nice and strong and nice and sort of shock absorbent and flexible. I've tested fitting the head on, and it does now fit down to where you can kind of see where it's burnished. Right down to here, that's the bottom cheek. So the next step will be to cut in the slot for the wedge, and then to fit it up. I'm then going to flame char the handle, and then give it an oil coat, and then that should be done. So yeah, there we go. There we go. The handle now attached to the head. You see there I've got a nice little oak stake put through. Last little step will be to put through the metal stake, which goes the opposite direction, and then that is one finished punch. Whack. So for the metal stake, all I've done is I've flattened off a piece of this round bar stock, sharpened it, flattened it to a point, and hammered it home. And that is what we are now left with, so that should be pretty secure. It's wet because obviously where I've ground it down, it was heating up the metal and starting to burn the wood, so not that it matters, because what I'm going to do next is char the handle, and then I'll oil it, and then we're done. Finished. There we go. All done. Handle has been charred, it has been oiled. We have a look at it. Punch is nice and sharp. If I can get it to focus. Solid fitting handle, touch mark done, double staked. Pretty happy with that.